quick flavour of some of the uncertainties that we're dealing with at the moment. I'd like to ask, first of all, Yatsenyuk to give us a few of your thoughts, Raza. Minister of Defence in Lithuania for 4 years, perhaps a Baltic perspective, but looking at the emergence of the new threats, the new security challenges ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Despite the very dramatic videos just now, I will follow the same very optimistic ideas and mood we got from Arseniy Yatsenyuk. And thinking about the speech here or discussion here, I was thinking, be prepared for what? In the Ministries of Defense, usually, we are elaborating scenarios for wars. But myself, as politician and speaking in Ukraine, in Kyiv, I would like to speak, to be prepared for what? For better. I will take opportunity, of course, to speak on the challenges from the point of view of the region I came from. As you know, I came from the country where the crisis with -15 of GDP recession few years ago was defeated. We did this. Was it easier for us than for Greece, for example, today? Maybe, because we didn't use it for spending yet. We didn't use yet for 13th salaries. And today we feel even stronger, especially in understanding what does fiscal discipline means. So we are ready, better prepared for tomorrow than it was even some years ago. Still, we have turbulences with, in Eurozone, but I am a strong believer in, of the future EU project as such. Simply no other way, just to overcome the challenges. To be more prepared for tomorrow, for our region, for European Union also, is to deal with energy insecurity. Dependence in the region on resources we have now. We talked about that yesterday, so I will not go into the details. Looking to the past 20 years ago, what did we have 23, 25 years ago? Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, we are the only countries of the former Soviet Union. We are in EU and in NATO today. Fortunately, we have no discussions on custom union or Eurasia today. Somebody say it's something like Soviet Union. But still, even after 23 years after our independence, surprise, surprise, you will say. Russia still is one of the security challenges in the region and in the Baltic states also. I would like very much not to speak about Russia at all. I hope I still have some time to attend conferences without speaking about the Russian challenge. Russia, I hope, will be able to change itself. But today, unfortunately, reality is different. We are in front, we in Lithuania, we are in front of a very important event. For us especially, not maybe so important for European Union, but for us, first time we will be chairing, in front of us is presidency for European Union for next half year. And Eastern Partnership is the most important strategy for the future developments for post-Soviet areas. So why is utmost important for us Vilnius Summit and what we will be able to do together with our Eastern partners to go forward. So I was so happy to hear very supportive and very bright and very optimistic understanding of the future from Arseniy Yatsenyuk. Of course, the most important precondition for the security in the region is the gravitation of the countries in the east towards European Union. Ukraine has an utmost important role and utmost important job to do for other countries also, not only for itself. As I already mentioned, the Vilnius Summit on Eastern Partnerships is very important because of the window of opportunities for Ukraine is not unlimited by time. We see some exhausted mood in the EU from one side and attempts of Putin Russia to regain influence in the region from another side. And I would like to stress one very important thing, that Ukrainian government and opposition together will make the biggest mistake if they together will not do everything possible to use the window of opportunities, both sides. Because the new opportunity cannot come at all. I remember our experience before EU and NATO membership. We were in opposition at that time. When the crucial time was for us, we were together, opposition and government. On the other hand, I remember a very interesting proverb: you can't eat your cake and have it too. So you have to make your choice, at least. And that's the main message I would like to send. And the very last sentence about European Union attitudes towards Ukrainian agreement with the EU for associated agreement. Unfortunately, not everybody in European Union understands that Ukrainian direction towards European Union is the key to solve current Russian autocratic regime problems. It is very important to understand for everybody, also in European Union. So, for me, to be prepared for tomorrow, it means Ukrainian associated agreement with European Union today. Thank you.
President, thank you very much. I just want to come on two things there. You said that the presidency that you will have, that Lithuania will have, might not be so important for the EU as it is for you. I think there will be people, not least Jan here, who would dispute that and say it's every bit as important. And certainly in my time as the Europe correspondent, every 6-month presidency does define the shape of the European Union going forward as well. At the same time, you talk about your confidence in the European project and in the Eurozone, but how much is that taking away from your concentration on looking further afield, your firefighting, rather than having to have the opportunity perhaps to look further ahead and deal and be better prepared for tomorrow?
What do you mean,
firefighting? By that
to deal with the crisis.
Indeed.
Crises are coming, and they will come in future, of course. But the main perspective, main understanding of security in the region is to be together in European Union. So that's why I am so optimistic, and for us, maybe it's much more understandable in our geopolitical situation than for the rest part of Europe and Europeans. They live somewhere surrounded by waters, I don't know, in between the United States and the rest part of the European Union. So for us, it's our challenge, our history, our past, and not only past, of course, but mainly the future. We see how much we got during our membership and before our membership, when we prepared for our membership. I think we are an example for the countries they would like to become members of EU today.
Yeah, thank you very much. We're going to broaden the horizons a little bit now, because also with us is Ariel Cohen, Senior Fellow of the Heritage Foundation, Member of Council on Foreign Policy Issues from the United States. Sorry, Foreign Relations. Ariel, thank you very much for being with us. Now, obviously we have an opportunity to look at financial crises here. It says on the page, US recovering. Well, if US is recovering, you'll put me right on that, I'm sure. Europe sinking, if Europe is sinking, and China rising. Ariel, over to you.
It's a pleasure being here, especially as I was born in Ukraine. This is a terrific forum with wonderful panelists and participants, so thank you very much for inviting me. This is my first time at this forum. We are looking today, the conventional wisdom says, at tentative improvement of the global economy. Unfortunately, as you know, Ukraine is now sort of following the European trajectory and is still in a recession. But with a proper change in investment climate, a boost in the rule of law, emphasizing education, science, and high tech, and Ukraine has a glorious tradition in all these fields, and amplifying international economic relations, not just with the West and Russia, but also with China as the emerging industrial superpower. Ukraine can eventually see prosperity, I'm convinced of that, but that means the economic climate at home has to change. What is needed is a political will and social mobilization, not egoism by the ruling elite. So this basically summarizes what I'm trying to say, and let's look in greater detail. Is US becoming a beacon of economic hope? Unfortunately, we are still seeing a tentative improvement, not a strong rebound. The Q4 2012 growth was minimal. It is expected to improve probably to 2 to 3% a year now, which is decent, led by housing, the shale gas and oil that are being pumped in increasing amounts are reducing the energy costs. And now you see for the first time a phenomenon in which corporations are moving production from China back into the United States. It's an amazing new development. Also, we heard our German colleagues complaining that some German companies establish industrial production in the United States, capitalizing on this delta, on the difference in cost of energy that is cheaper by a factor of 3 in terms of gas in comparison with Europe. That has a direct implication for Ukraine, because Ukraine, according to current geological projections, does have considerable amount of shale gas, and possibly shale oil. And further in my opening remarks, I would like to expand on energy issues for Ukraine that I dedicated years and years of my career hammering that point and working on that. Now, in terms of Japan, Japan is following the US example in doing what they call the Abenomics. Abe is, of course, the prime minister, so it's a massive quantitative easing, meaning cheap credit, and they think to jump, they're hoping to jumpstart the Japanese economy and then to slow down, to prevent the inflation in 2014 and pursue a structural reform that is very necessary, not just in Japan, but also in Ukraine. Russia, which says that Europe is doing so poorly, is actually not doing so brilliantly itself. If you take a very decent, impressive 3.4% economic growth in 12, down from 4.3% in 11, and slowing further down to 3.3 in 2013. When you take out the energy growth, the energy sector growth, Russia is in a pretty anemic growth. The key issue, nevertheless, can Russia continue to dominate the European oil and gas markets, or we are in a shift for the first time in decades in which Europe is going to get more LNG, liquid natural gas, from places like Nigeria, Algeria, Qatar, and others, possibly develop in some areas shale gas, and also eventually maybe importing some amount of gas from the United States. So the Russian monopoly or quasi-monopoly on European market is becoming more shaky. Finally, let's focus on Ukraine. There is a discontent even among the formerly loyal oligarchs with the current economic policies. Some members of the ruling party, such as Sergei Tihipkov, Deputy Prime Minister, blames a lack of political will for limited progress. Well, if it's Mr. Tihipkov's cabinet, whose political will is he talking about? The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank recommend that Ukraine will pursue necessary structural reforms more vigorously. The projection of growth for 13 is 1%, going up to 3% in 14. And the IMF quoting continued weak external demand, uncertainty over sustainability of domestic macroeconomic policy mix, and I won't bore you with the rest of the economic, I don't want to say mumbo jumbo, but the economic language, so shall we say. The adjustment is necessary, macroeconomic adjustment. The unfinished agenda is vast. I talked about the business climate, fighting corruption, but you know, I'm on the board of US-Ukraine Business Council, and we've been talking about that for 15 years, and still the progress is by a glacial pace at best. So to achieve progress in the future, you have to export, you have to diversify, you cannot only look east and not only at Western Europe. There are many emerging markets that Ukraine, with this base of technology and science, can find niches in energy. It is not just shale, it's not just offshore, it's also nuclear, and it's also the renewables. You have to expand, broaden the energy economy base. The agricultural potential is tremendous, and there will be markets for Ukrainian agricultural products, not just in Europe, which Europe is inundated with ag production from its own production, but also the Middle East, also China and elsewhere in Asia. So irrespective of one's political views, the growth of participatory, transparent institutions under the rule of law will help foster economic growth and make the country more attractive for all citizens of Ukraine, as well as for domestic and foreign investors, the key to any Ukrainian breakthrough. Ukraine has an opportunity to discard its Soviet legacy, free itself from dependence that was inherent in its Soviet economic ties and design, and reap the benefit of the 21st century knowledge economy. Thank you very much.
Aaron, thank you for that. We're going to broaden further into the Middle East in just a second, but you mentioned the importance of Nigeria and Algeria, among other countries, as potential oil suppliers. This helps us broaden the field a little bit. My sense is that those are two extremely insecure areas at the moment in many ways to expect to be able to benefit from. We're talking about security in an insecure world. I know you've done a lot of wargaming exercises in energy supply and oil energy supply. What are the chances for tomorrow of these areas being not just potentially valuable, but working out?
It's a very good, it's a tough question, because you see the rise of terrorist attacks in Nigeria. Nigeria, unfortunately, is becoming more unstable. There is a radical religious-based terrorist organization called Boko Haram active in Nigeria. In Algeria, it's a different story. The crackdown by the military and the government has been taking place since the 1990s. The question is, will they work it out? But these are two potentially large, I was talking about gas, not as much oil,
gas,
potentially gas exporters, different ones, because Algeria has an opportunity to pipe gas to Europe. By the way, Libya has a huge opportunity of piping gas. Algeria also is projected to have a lot of shale gas in addition to conventional gas. So Algeria is important. But as we speak, they're making new discoveries, not just along the western coast of Africa, but also along the eastern coast of Africa, in the waters offshore Mozambique, between Mozambique and Madagascar. These are new provinces. We don't know how big they are. This is conventional offshore. This is not shale.
Sorry, no, but they're all hostage to fortune, it feels, at the moment.
It is not, because there's so much gas in the world now that is potentially available. By saying potential, I would say within 10 years. In addition to that, we didn't even touch upon countries other than the United States that had huge resources of shale gas. China now is projected to have the largest shale gas resources in the world. The problem with China that you need technology, you need property rights, and you need water to conduct what is called fracking, the process by which you extract the gas. And the other country that has tons of shale gas is Argentina. So it's not, we're not dependent on one country. We are in the process of natural gas becoming a global commodity through LNG. And you trade it on spot, and that drives the Gazprom price on which Ukraine is dependent down. And that is good news for Ukraine.
Aaron, thank you very much indeed. Let's focus still on the Middle East as well. We have with us Yatsenyuk, former Foreign Minister of Turkey. Yasser, I think you can perhaps give us some perspective on the Middle East in particular. It's described here as, with a question mark, a mirror of global threats. Over to you.
Yes, actually, Middle East is a mirror of the global threat, because many threats spread from Middle East, and it may contribute both positively and negatively to the security of the world. And Turkey is a country with multiple identity. It is a Black Sea country, a member of NATO, so part of the transatlantic community, security structure. It is founding member of the Council of Europe. It's a Balkan country, it's a Caucasus country, it's a Middle Eastern country, part of the Islamic world, etc. So because of this multiple identity, Turkey has a certain visibility in many structures that deals with security. But in this forum, there are very distinguished participants who know much better than me, and that can explain with much more eloquence than me regarding the security issues in areas other than the Middle East. For this reason, let me focus my attention on the Middle East. When we talk of the Middle East, security-wise, the question, of course, is Arab Spring and now Syrian crisis. Arab Spring in countries other than Syria have reached a certain level, I will not say of stability, but at least we know how it started and the point that it has reached. In Tunisia, it started, it is the country where the Arab Spring has started, and when Ennahda party, which was based on the Muslim Brothers structure, emerged as the strongest party in the elections, free elections, and the leader of Ennahda, who was expelled from Tunisia for decades because of his anti-secular activities. So he became now the major decision maker in the country, and to perhaps calm down the international community and also the domestic public opinion, he made a statement at the very beginning when he emerged stronger, saying that they will not impose Sharia in Tunisia, that they will not force the ladies to wear scarf, and that they will not ban serving alcohol in the restaurants. But later on, we found out that because of the Salafi pressure coming from the bottom, he had to make certain concessions to the Salafis. Now we see that this is being repeated in other countries, such as Egypt. In Egypt, it is not only the Salafis, but also secularists who are opposing now the policies of Mr. Morsi. And curiously enough, an institution which is regarded as the center of the Sunni thinking of Islam, Al-Azhar, is opposed, is criticizing very harshly Morsi regime. This is how the point that we reached in Egypt. In Libya, it is still, the dust still is in the air and it is not settled. I'm not going to dwell on Bahrain, where international community turned a blind eye to the repression of the public demonstrations, and in Yemen, some sort of solution has now been found. It is relatively stable. When we come to Syria, it is full of unknowns. What is going on in Syria? In my opinion, in Syria, every option is worse than the other option. And almost all stakeholders were wrong in their act. First of all, Bashar Assad regime was wrong by firing at the demonstrations which were unarmed. It started like this. And then the opposition was wrong to mislead the international community that the fall of the regime was imminent and that they should be supported. Then the international community was wrong by believing the opposition, and the international community was again wrong by arming the opposition. And it's at that stage that some members of the international community had to break on their supply of arms, because they discovered that many arms that they were supplying to the opposition found its way in the hand of the radicalists, fundamentalists, Jabhat al-Nusra. Nowadays, we see a further development in the Al-Qaeda branch in Iraq, which is called Islamic State of Iraq, thinking of the pan-Islamic state, Caliphate, and they regard themselves as the Iraqi branch of this Caliphate. You may remember that since Caliphate was abolished in Turkey in 1924, after the sultans held this position for 4 centuries, and there's no something that corresponds to Pope in the Christian world. So they want to re-establish this with these borders of the state still keeping them maintaining, but there will be a pan-Islamic state. And they continue saying that Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria is part of it. So now that the international community put on a brake on their supply, Turkey, which started with them, found itself in a position of offside, as if you want to use a football term. So Turkey now is supporting the opposition, but its support has nuances from the support of other countries. This is where we are at present.
I want to come in on that point then, because we're talking about being prepared for tomorrow. One thing we seem to know about Syria is that there is no international united political will as to what to do, or understanding as to what to do. I noticed that the Golan Heights now has re-emerged as a highly sensitive area. Syrian troops have largely pulled out. They're leaving a vacuum there. So are we looking at the, I mean, you've taken us nicely from Tunisia to Egypt on a sort of a measured path of Islamization to a certain extent, but are we talking about a potential explosion here of Middle East conflict that we're just not prepared for?
It may implode rather than explode.
But if it incorporates Israel, it explodes at the same time as it implodes by definition.
It may, of course, it also depends how you describe or what you have in mind for the word explosion or implosion. But Bashar Assad has taken a similar step when it withdrew his soldiers from northeast Syria inhabited by Kurds. This was, according to one theory, because he needed these soldiers elsewhere, but also he wanted to punish Turkey because of its support to the opposition, and Turkey has its own problem, its domestic Kurds, which has ramifications in the north of Syria and northeast of Syria. So he wanted to punish. Now he moved a pawn on the chessboard, similar to this one, by pulling out the soldiers from Golan Heights. This is a very interesting scenario because he may have thought that this gap will be filled by fundamentalist Islamists. So he will give a more alarming signal to the international community and perhaps pull Israel to the game, because Israel so far preferred to wait and see and perhaps let Syria become exhausted, bleeding and to exhaustion, so that it could be easier to manipulate it.
Ariel is itching to jump in there as well. Ariel, and then we'll move on to Bogdan.
Apropos the Middle East, I just came back from Israel, flew to Kyiv straight here. My impression is that the Israelis would have preferred to deal with the devil that, well, from their point of view, of course, the devil that they know, Bashar Assad, than the new radical Islamist groups like Jabhat al-Nusra. But there's another dimension that the minister did not touch upon because of the constraints of the time. And that is today we are witnessing escalating tensions between the Sunni world. And what we describe in Syria is primarily the intra-Sunni, well, the Alawi regime in Syria is not Sunni, but there are tensions between the Sunni world, broadly defined, that is undergoing this Arab Spring, and the Shia regime in Tehran that is most probably in the process of arming itself with nuclear weapons. And that dimension of the intra-Islam conflict is defining the Middle East just as much as the Islamization and the Arab Spring that they're going simultaneously. And that is a huge, huge source of future instability as well.
Errol, thank you very much indeed. Yasir, thank you as well. We're going to move on now to Bogdan Klich, former Minister of Defense for Poland, former MEP as well, and I believe you were a close advisor on accession negotiations as well, Bogdan. But here we are in our ever-changing worlds, and security, as we're hearing from left and from right, of considerable concern. Where do you stand?
Firstly, I would move for a while, at least, from the Middle East to Central and Eastern Europe, because we are here, we are facing the historical decisions taken by both Ukrainian political elites and European Union itself. So let me focus on this part of the world, although last week I visited also Israel, Palestine and Jordan, and we could go on with the discussion about the huge strategic challenge that Iran poses for international community. But I have the feeling, you know, that to some extent we are the victims of Arseniy Yatsenyuk dream. He has a dream. He has spoken about this dream. This is the dream shared by a big part of Ukrainian society, and this is the historical dream about the integration of between Ukraine and the European Union. He used here a very broad historical perspective, speaking about 30 years in Ukrainian history that were lost in the way of European integration. I would say that we lost at least last 9 years, and this is the guilt for both, I mean, Ukrainian political elites and European Union itself, that just after the Orange Revolution there was no strategic step from the Union side to present the association agreement as one of the crucial impulses making the road, the way of Ukraine to European community easier, much easier. And this historical challenge that we face this year, we should appreciate, because this is really a significant political moment for both, once again, Ukraine and European Union. But we should keep in mind that between 2004 and today, there were many changes within European and Euro-Atlantic bodies. I say Euro-Atlantic bodies because Ukraine has also still valid the declaration of NATO to be a member of the alliance since the Bucharest summit, but during that time, between 2008 and nowadays, the alliance also developed. So I would like to share with you some remarks connected with the major, as I see them, the major elements of this evolution of both NATO and European Union, and the adjustment of NATO and the EU to the current security threats and challenges. First of all, within NATO we are after crucial decisions of the Lisbon Summit concerning the new roadmap for next 10 years for the alliance. I mean the new, not so new, but new strategic concept that was adopted during the Lisbon Summit. And in this concept there is an attempt of the community, Euro-Atlantic community, to find the right balance between traditional tasks of the alliance and, let's say, new tasks of the alliance. I mean between collective defense and deterrence and expeditionary missions. And in my opinion, this balance was introduced into the document, but the future will be shaped by the implementation of this balance in reality. It means that this is the main challenge for the European and American members of the alliance, to introduce, to implement in the practice this balance between Article 5 and expeditionary commitments that were so clearly introduced into the strategic concept. From the position of countries like my country, like Poland, we agree for the new shape of the alliance as a security organization under one precondition, that the collective defense function of the alliance will be preserved. It means that that NATO can be a security organization if and only if this collective defense is preserved. And there are good signs of that, because not only into the document but also into the practice, there were 3 anchors, I would call them anchors, introduced. I mean joint training and exercises in the military field. Secondly, so-called visible assurance of the member states of the alliance. And thirdly, what is also important, updating of contingency plans. And we can confirm, together with Rasa Yatsenyuk, that we are very strongly tied during last years, working together on updating of Polish contingency plans that we had since the beginning of the former decade, and concentrated on new contingency plans for Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. This is one of the crucial anchors of the alliance. The contingency planning is one of the crucial aspects of military dimension, of military credibility of this organization. Secondly, joint training and exercises. Finally, it will happen at the end of this year that we will have the first live exercise on the territory again of Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia on Article 5 scenario, the live exercise of NATO response force, this crucial tool that we have in our hands in the alliance. We are waiting for that, we are working for that, and we expect, that the final result of this live exercise, Steadfast Yes, at the end of this year, particularly in November this year, will show the alliance's ability to act together. Secondly, I would like to say something about capabilities of the alliance, because there are several shortfalls. By the way, not only in the alliance, but also in the European Union, when CSDP and CFSP are taken into consideration. And both organizations reacted in the same way. Reacted creating multilateral projects that were introduced into the vocabulary of the European Union as a pooling and sharing initiative, and to the NATO vocabulary as smart defense. This is a new approach to capabilities, because it is in the times of financial crisis and financial constraints, and when it is necessary to continue capabilities before development process, it is much easier to achieve the goals pooling and sharing, but now pooling, our efforts together. And we hope within the alliance that these projects will be open for the participation of our partners, for example, Ukraine. And the third...
just jump in there if I can for a moment. Microphone, there we go. Because I think in those 2 points, you're talking about the credibility of NATO is collective security and the ability to achieve that, make that work. And then you talk about the financial constraints, economic constraints of every member state. And the reality is, over the last decade, isn't it, that more and more countries don't feel they can contribute in the way that perhaps NATO needs. So that credibility, in the eyes of many, is crumbling and not strengthening.
You are right, and this is the challenge that we face together on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. On one hand, we have a new American security and defense policy with a tremendous and strategic shift of this policy expressed so clearly at the beginning of last year by President Obama, when he declared very clearly that the strategic focus of American foreign security and defense policy is moving from Europe. It's moving from Europe to the Pacific region and to Eastern Asia. Yeah? So this is the first important factor. The second important factor, this is the change of, I would say, of the collaboration with European partners, operational collaboration with European partners in Europe. Americans decided to move two of their 4 brigades from Europe, but they are inviting us, European partners, to have much more functional, much more operational collaboration with them. And the aviation detachment in Poland is one of the examples of this new shape of collaboration, that they are concentrated much more on training and exercises instead of traditional deployment of forces. And we have to react to that. We have to, in Europe, we have to react, and we are trying to react to those new challenges. Also to the challenges that you described. It means that Europe should be much more responsible for its own security. That Europe should be much more responsible for its own defense. And this is a huge challenge for us, especially in the times of the environment of European financial crisis, especially for the European Union. I hope that we will be able to talk about that during this session also, so I will not touch, those issues upon.
We'll get there. We've got time. Bogdan, thank you very much indeed. Now, obviously, I do want you to get involved, so I'm going to turn to the floor in just a moment for questions on. We can go from any of the areas that we're talking about, so please feel free to broaden the horizons if you want, or home in, but wherever you want to go. Just before we do, Alexander, thank you. Ehuru Alcott is with us once again, and I think it's interesting, Ehuru, that if you want to build a better system for security and stability in the future, you have to plan now, don't you? In many ways, that is precisely what you have done in Kenya, in reconstructing a constitution for a country in the hope that that will develop into something in the future. Taking that as a sort of, if you like, a starting base, I wonder if you could comment on the sense of preparedness for tomorrow. Just lift it, should be fine.
Okay. I think for me, this is a very humongous topic, and I'm not even sure, with the time we have, we can try to really understand the extent to it. But let me start from perhaps what will appear a rhetorical question. Is there tomorrow without the individuals or without states? And I say this because I think today what we are witnessing shell states. We're witnessing very weak states. And therefore, I'd like us to start from there. Can we really talk of tomorrow if we are witnessing all this crumbling, weakening states, and individuals being a real threat? Let me speak about a few dilemmas that we ourselves as Kenyans, maybe from an African perspective, are to contend with in terms of reconstruction. The first one is we ask ourselves the question whether we are all equal citizens or individuals within a state. And perhaps we can extend that question to also say, are we all at par or equal citizens of the globe or of the world, so that then we can say, if we are discussing what is tomorrow, if we want to prepare ourselves for tomorrow, we want to carry everybody along, every state along. And therefore, in the context of Kenya, we started by understanding whether in our own constitution, we can begin to reconstruct those ideologies. So for me, that's really a first question, whether we are all at par as individuals of this globe moving tomorrow, going to tomorrow. So that for me is point number one. And point number two, which is related to that, is that what we are witnessing within the states is that ethnicity or regionalism or negative ethnicity is dismantling the idea of a state. So that moving towards tomorrow, we may find ourselves tomorrow without states or with individualized groupings. And therefore, we have these multiple ethnic interests playing within the theater of the state. And therefore begins to question, what then is a state? And the citizens or individuals within a state are pretending to be a nation state, but they're actually not. They're advancing their own ethnic, individual, communal interests at the expense of the rest of the state. And of course, related to that, you find that we are not talking about nations within nations or states within states. And the reason that the reason we have that kind of situation is because I think our value system as individuals or as states is sort of contentious. What is our value system for us as Africans and perhaps for you as Europeans? I mean, you keep on talking about Europe, but it seems to me that other than just the geographical location of Europe and your existential location in whatever countries you are, really the value system is still questionable. So that you are not able to carry that value system forward and say, we are preparing ourselves for tomorrow because we have got one ideology that we want to advance. And therefore, this for me means that we need to urgently rethink the notion or the concept of a state. Because the state we are seeing is failing to protect individuals, is failing to protect communities. Some people within the state have become curious onlookers. We are passengers in a state. Others have taken over power. They have concentrated that power for the benefit of their communities or individuals or regions. For us in Africa, I come from a country where there are 42 ethnic groups. Therefore, 42 different languages. Now, in terms of our political formation, if a member of one ethnic group takes over power, like today we have a Kikuyu president, for example, you'll see that members of the Kikuyu community or the region where they come from assume that they are the symbol of the state, and therefore begin to threaten the existence of others.
But sorry to interrupt you, Dan. You just rebuilt the constitution for Kenya to ensure that that sort of element disappears, and you've done it off the back of a major conflictual trauma within the country on ethnic lines. Are you saying that despite the great work that you have been involved in, that's a paper exercise?
Well, you can have the best constitutions in the world. You can build the best constitution in the world. Remember, constitutions are political engagement, political agreements. It's like a shopping list. Everybody brings their concerns and their interests into the negotiation table. And you will wish that whatever your aspiration as a people are will be found in the constitution. But it may not matter whether you build the best constitution in the world or not. If you put in a goat or a dog and tell the dog to implement that constitution, it may not be what the paper is written on. So for us, what we've done in Kenya is we've tried to say, okay, how do we address this issue of individualized existence of communities? And therefore, in our own constitution, we've tried to say, let's not make a constitution for us today, but let's also look about, let's make this constitution for tomorrow's generation. So we have put in provisions in our constitution that do not just safeguard us, Ekulu, today, but also tomorrow's generation. And therefore, we put in there issues to do with equality, equity, affirmative action, the equitable distribution of wealth, for example. You will find in our constitution in Kenya, we have come up with what is called an equalization fund. For example, I don't know how Ukraine is, but in Kenya, you have what we call the Kenya of the North and the Kenya of the South. That the Kenya of the North was neglected and relegated for donkey years. So that today, if you look at the state, some people are just mere citizens, they are second-class citizens. So in our constitution, we've said, how do we bring the Kenya of the North to be at par with the Kenya of the South? So in a chapter we call public finance, we've come up with a formula on how to redistribute wealth to each and every part of Kenya. And we've said at least a certain percentage must go to all the 47 regions in Kenya. And that way we can say we are preparing Kenyans to live tomorrow happily with each other. In conclusion, let me say that I think we need to think about, again, I want to give you the question. Is there really tomorrow if there is no today? Or if today is under real threat? All these things we've heard about terrorism, nuclear, I don't think they target the state. The state is an abstract reality. All these dangers target the individuals. And therefore, if individuals are vanquished, then you will not have tomorrow. You will not have states. And therefore, tomorrow, for me, should be qualitative. I'm not a prophet of doom, but I think these dangers are real. We may not have tomorrow with all these dangers in place. I think I'll stop there.
Sounds like we've got to get to the day after tomorrow to get where we want to get. But Akuru, thank you very much indeed. Right, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Akuru. Let's open this up to the floor. We have some questions. If we can get microphones, we'll start down at the front with Mr. Charlie, please. Can I just see a show of hands for a moment so I can gauge the room and make sure that I'm getting them from all sides? Any hands over here? I'll keep an eye out. In any case,
I have one question to Polish Minister of Defense. I think it's constructive to demand contingency planning in situation when NATO not identify Russia as enemy and Russia not identify NATO as enemy. And as you know, this is demand of some Eastern members of NATO for contingency planning. It's practically not permit to overcome or to start real historical reconciliation between Russia and NATO.
I will tell you. This is, the membership in NATO is not only about political dialogue. Membership in NATO is about security, about the guarantees of security for all member states of this alliance. And security depends on not only the feeling that the member state belongs to the community, that participates in the procedures of decision making. Security, the feeling of security, this assurance, is also about military guarantees that in a situation that can happen in the future, the alliance will be able to support a member state in a concrete, in a right, military way. So it means that the alliance has to be prepared for, let's say, military threats, and the member states have to show the readiness of supporting all other member states with military capabilities. And this is exemplified by contingency planning. Contingency planning that is as crucial for Turkey. Turkey has contingency plans, and for Poland, as well as for Norway, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. Yes, I'm speaking about the expectations of so-called border states of the alliance. But we have our reasons for such expectations, and it was a great achievement that between 2008 and November 2010 we were able to receive such documents. These are operational military documents. We are not talking about details of those documents. But this is the real reassurance for the member states concerned that in a situation of a threat, we will be supported. This is Article 5 of the Washington Treaty.
Okay, Bogdan, thank you very much. Perhaps, Raza, you'd like to come as well.
Just a few moments to add. Yes, you are right. NATO is not treating Russia as a threat. Nowhere officially. But on the other side, even in Russian official documents, they are treating NATO as threat, at least NATO enlargement as a threat for Russia. And one more example, 2009, and this year we will have large-scale Russian and Russian common military exercises, not with defensive scenarios as NATO has, but with offensive scenarios, even using tactical nukes in scenarios. So I think it is an answer.
And yes, sir, you want to...
Thank you very much. In the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where I served for 40 years, many people were born with this NATO and they were retired with NATO. So I have something like 40 years of connection with NATO affairs. NATO is not an automatic computerized system whereby if one of the member countries, according to Article 5, is attacked, the other countries, the other member countries will consider this attack as directed to their own country. But the problem arises after that. The reaction of the countries will be that they will take all appropriate measures that they deem appropriate. Many countries will deem appropriate to make a statement blaming the attack of this member country. And you cannot expect that all member countries will mobilize their armies and protect this other member country. So this expectation is not right.
It's not as watertight or as wonderful as
it is not automatic. It is not as pushing the button. We came across with an experience like this in 1960s when there was a crisis between Turkey and Greece regarding Cyprus. Turkey received a letter from the President Johnson of the United States saying that in case you intervene militarily in Cyprus, and if as a result of this Russia invades Turkey, don't expect that we will be intervening automatically.
A lesson
so this is a lesson that
from the past that
I would like to pass to this audience.
Perhaps informs the future. We had a question here.
My name is Oleg Kravchenko and I came from Donetsk. It's in the eastern part of Ukraine. And if you don't mind, I will have two very short questions from our speakers. For the first question, I was inspired by yesterday's debates on frozen conflicts and reconciliation problems. And of course by today morning news. You know that today will be a meeting of Kosovo and Serbia leaders as the second round of the negotiations. And in this sense, I just want to ask you to comment the prospects of Serbian Euro integration process. And the general estimated the general chances for the success of such problems, of such tough problem like it has in Western Balkans. And my second question goes probably to Ariel Cohen. It concerns the French military operation in Mali, Serval, and I just want to ask you to comment the general prospect for stability in the Sahel region, in the region of Africa, tropical Africa, and regarding the economic background, of course, and regarding the spreading of radical Islamism and jihadism, which sometimes it looks like planned actions, and is it interesting for Europe and for the United States, the development of stability in this region?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay. Let's start with the Kosovo-Serbia question. Is there anyone who'd like to address that directly? Yes, sir. Thank you.
Actually, for Kosovo, of course, if we follow what happens in the Middle East as the uprising and the will of the people being expressed, in Kosovo, the Kosovars decided to establish their own states. And Serbia does not recognize it, despite the fact that 90 and something percent of the Kosovars are of Albanian origin and they want their independent state. So to side in the Middle East with the popular expectations and to take a position against such a will in Kosovo is inconsistent. This is as far as Kosovo is concerned. In Mali, there's again a contradiction in the attitude of...
I tell you, I'm sorry, we'll hold you on Mali for a moment. We'll come back to that in a second. I think, Bogdan, you wanted to refer to the Kosovo-Serbia situation as well.
I wanted only to remind us that in July we will celebrate the next round of enlargement of the European Union, and Croatia will be the next member of the EU. So it will be next step in integration of, step by step, integration of parts of Western Balkans to the European Union. Second remark, we still keep our Altea mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina. There is a deep and long discussion within the EU concerning the future of this mission. I represented in the EU together with Spanish, French colleagues, and still Polish diplomacy represents the opinion that it would be necessary as quickly as possible to reshape the current military-civilian mission with a civilian mission based and concentrated on institution building in Bosnia and Herzegovina, because this is the main challenge for the European community to help to preserve the institutions of the state. The third remark. We recovered from the huge and bloody conflicts in the neighborhood of the European Union within Europe. It means in the Western Balkans. To some extent, it was possible to stabilize the situation in Kosovo after the intervention of the alliance. So there is a set of successes concerning this region, but the goal is the full integration of that region into the European Union and full cooperation, this cooperation between the parts of this region with the alliance. It will stabilize, it will make the basis for the progress of this region in the future.
Okay, thank you, Bogdan. Ariel, interesting case, France moving into Mali and almost caught short to have to do it, but where do you think, we know it's going to be, well, it's proving difficult for them to get out again.
It's easy.
It should be good, yeah.
It's easy. It's working? Yes, great. it's easy to get in, as the Americans learned so well in Afghanistan, and the Russians, the Soviets learned before that, and the British learned before that. It's not that easy to create a policy that will address whatever real underlying grievances there may be. In the case of Mali in the north, of course, we're looking at a post-colonial world, and a lot of these borders were drawn by colonial offices in Paris, in this particular case, or London, or elsewhere. So, in certain sense, as we heard from our colleague from Kenya, these boards unite, and sometimes these boards divide many peoples, ethnicities, tribes, and different interpretations of religion. So you have Tuaregs in the north. Tuaregs are spread throughout Sahara, and you have others further south in a clash of their interpretation of different schools of Islam, which may be even more different than Catholicism and Pravoslavia and Orthodoxy, etc. Secondly, I was frankly shocked after the French did provide assistance in Afghanistan that there was even a thought of charging our French allies for air transport in and out of Mali. Of course, that silly idea was discarded quickly. But there are a lot of things we can do to help with satellite imagery, with electronics, etc. But if the French took upon themselves this mission, and the French do have a history of intervening in Afrique francophone, in Africa, especially in former colonies, quite successfully, we as Americans, as members of NATO, have an interest of defeating these radical insurgencies and working together, whether it's in the intelligence field or in the military field, special operations, communications, air transport, and lift, which, by the way, is something the Europeans eventually will have to develop, and see it through, that we don't get stuck, that people on the ground don't suffer, and that our military have all the resources to accomplish this task.
Ara, thank you very much. So there's a gentleman there, then...
Alexander Venturenko, Center for International Security and Strategic Studies. We started to discuss very interesting questions about the security dilemma. But I should remind here that Ukraine, its Peter, of course, is typical weak country today. And for Ukraine, it's much more important is insecurity dilemma. Ukraine is a split country, split on many dimensions: economic, political, ideological, geographic, even religious. Political group in this country, nation in a whole, split. We have not consolidated nations. And different social groups in this country have different understanding of national security issues, different system of values, which is started to speak about it. In this situation, when each social group striving to achieve its goal is different from the other group, lead to a situation that the general security, general national security, catastrophically diminishing for all social groups. Second problem is the political elite in the country, so-called political elite, have chronic tendency to substitute the national security issues with the issue of security of regime. This is a very serious problem. And the third one, this prevailing perception of security in the state, not from the outside factors, from the inside factors. The major threats for the rank and file people is from the existing regime, from its repression machine.
I think these are all extremely important points with regard to security and insecurity. And we will move on in the course of our next session, in fact, to focus down on
and last issue, very important today.
Very quickly then, please.
Very quickly, yeah. The question is about that opposition should play a key role in consolidation of the nations. But these oppositions should start from itself, because unhealthy personal ambitions of several opposition leaders and quarrel inside the opposition objectively play on the hands of the interests of the ruling elite. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So there's one just here and then one behind Owen Green. Yeah.
Thank you. I suppose my main point and question relates to the last intervention and a couple of the panel interventions about the challenges of engaging with so-called fragile or at least conflict-disrupted states. Can you just highlight 2 points initially? Let me just reinforce without elaboration those points that seem to me they were made, but not made perhaps with sufficient emphasis. The challenges of global security governance in a context in which not only China is emerging as a major player, but one with which it's possible to engage, but it's complicated, but also the Indonesias, Brazils, Turkeys, and so on. This is genuinely multilateral adjustments in security governance, not simply accommodating to one rising power. And I think we need to think that there's a lot more to be done besides just ad hoc adaptation in relation to G8+. And the second is the nuclear proliferation issue, which is going to, which is obviously particularly challenging now. But coming back to the intervention, I think one of the challenges is how to avoid learning all of our lessons on the basis of the Iraqi and Afghanistan and perhaps Mali experience, and how to respond to countries where there are a sort of serious concern, a sort of perceived need for intervention, because those are very special contexts, it seems to me. And in the context, debates about whether or not and how to international countries and our international community can contribute to state building and peace building in a wide range of other countries always too quickly gets polarized in, is this a military intervention or is it not? It seems to me that what we've learned is that it's very unlikely to be effective unless there's some military or security component to such interventions, but much more light touch, light footprint, more complex engagements offer the way for the future. But then the challenges, and I suppose I was moved to make this point by your excellent point about it's easy to get in, hard to get out. An awful lot of the challenges immediately are then what the exit strategy is. And it seems to me that we need to develop a framework where we recognize that these challenges do not go away quickly. I was involved in Mali in the mid-1990s. And for 8 years, it seemed as if everything was moving ahead very well. But there came a period of catastrophically bad governance over the last 5 or 6 years, which in a sense everybody was aware of, but people didn't pay direct attention to.
Okay.
Because I'll finish, because the agenda was so much around much larger interventions around Iraq and Afghanistan. I think we need to find a framework for pragmatic, smaller scales, but effective engagement on those issues.
Where on earth do we find that framework, Aaron?
I totally agree with you, and just as the United States should not learn only from Iraq and Afghanistan, and I will remind you that our Iraq counterinsurgency strategy was written verbatim by the general whose name I'm not going to mention now, because I read it, verbatim from the US experience in Vietnam, and did not apply specifically to the Muslim world, be it the Mesopotamia or Afghanistan. Ditto, a lot of British lessons learned were from Northern Ireland, which equally did not apply, and I hear it till last night. Why don't you chaps, apply our wonderful experience in the Irish peacemaking and pacification? The second issue is that we are in a new world. We are, in the United States, cutting our military budgets quite significantly. And for those areas such as Africa, which are of great concern for Europe, understandably so, because you don't want 10 million refugees pouring into Europe, in addition to all those who poured already, this will be increasingly a matter for European budgets, military and otherwise. We will not share that burden as much, especially as people mentioned here. President Obama chose to reorient us and pivot to Asia, with very, very limited resources to do so. So how on earth you are underwriting a deployment in a theater that is probably, I didn't calculate it, probably 5 times larger than the Atlantic/European theater, question mark. And I'll leave it at that.
Great, great. Finish on the question mark, because I know Guru wants to come in then.
I'm curious about the use of your phrase that Africa is of great concern to Europe. I think for me, let's try to understand what is that concern about. You see, if you want to go to tomorrow together as citizens of the globe, we need to address some, for example, such as trade restrictions between Africa and Europe, that the markets should be favorable for us to be able to do our business in Europe. So this great concern to Africa for me is terminology that we really need to try and deconstruct. And therefore I want to say, this military intervention, especially in the context of Africa, is not a solution. As a matter of fact, when we militarily intervene in a country such as Mali or any other in Africa, you're actually creating more divide.
Do you leave the gap then? Do you leave the vacuum?
You leave the vacuum because of the nature of political formations in this country. And like I say, politics is almost tribalized, it's elitist. So you support, for example, a certain group militarily, you are effectively relegating another group. I think for me, if we were to prepare ourselves for tomorrow, we need to go beyond just military intervention and such political affiliation, because they divide these countries. I mean, you can say the same thing about Iraq, you can say the same thing about Afghanistan. I mean, and the question then, why the French in Mali? Or why the Americans in Iraq and anybody else? This is a question that can be, can be deconstructed. And that way, maybe we need to go beyond just this sort of military and political support for certain regime in Africa or anywhere else. And talk about trade, talk about things that bring us together, environment, global warming, and such things, such kind of things.
Good, thank you very much. Rasa.
Just short last remarks on self-criticism about Ukraine. It's very good to have diagnosis, to know the problems, but better would be to replace problems into challenges. You are a great country. You are one of the greatest countries in post-Soviet area, and you are able to solve the problems, challenges. So now, having diagnosis, knowing the problems, the challenges, you have to treat them just to go forward, and the tool to do this is on the table.
Thank you very much. Now, I know there are still some questions, and I did promise the gentleman in the back you would get in.
Thank you. A brief question to Dr. Cohen. The question is about the accelerated Russian militarization. About accelerated Russian militarization. If you may know, President Putin has taken steps to accelerate the military reform and the military spending. Russia will probably spend $74 billion on its military this year, and the chart is growing like this. In this sense, what's the state of the US-Russian relations? And there have been actually several talks in open and probably non-public talks between President Obama and the Russian leadership. And what has changed since President Obama has come to his second term in office? Thank you.
Okay. Ariel?
US-Russia relations in 30 seconds. First of all, the United States made a unilateral step of deciding not to modernize and upgrade missile defense in Europe. And a reasonable person would have expected a reciprocal step by the Russians. Say, thank you very much, let's now talk about something constructive. Instead, unless I'm wrong, Russians pocketed that concession, said thank you very much, but now we have more demands about your missile defense, which I find not too constructive. Secondly, with years of communications and diplomatic talks, including high level, including our Secretary of State, literally chasing her Russian counterpart, Mr. Lavrov, around the world. The progress on Syria between Washington and Moscow is about zip. Thirdly, on Iran, there's no understanding, no mutual understanding how to proceed to prevent Iran to become the next nuclear power. So I'm not too optimistic. I do read Russian, and I read the rivers of anti-American invective and propaganda that are pouring in the Russian media and on Russian television. It doesn't help. It is not a 21st century mindset. It is back to the USSR, back to the Cold War. Let's bash America and blame them for everything. Some of that criticism is justified. For example, the criticism of how and who is responsible for the economic crisis that started in the United States. If it coached in reasonable and civilized terms, it's a subject for discussion, and it was promulgated by the French and by the others. So this is something we can talk about. To say that Russian civil society and Russian NGOs are all agents of the United States and then punish the orphans by denying them an option of being adopted to prosperous American families is crazy, okay? So I think there's a long agenda of things that can be improved between President Obama and President Putin.
Aaron, thank you very much. I think we've just got time to squeeze in a question from the left, as we must.
Thank you, David, for giving me the floor.
That's working.
Thank you, David, for giving me the floor. As first ambassador of Ukraine to Republic of Turkey, I have two short questions to former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkish, Mr. Yakish. Sayın Yakish, as you know, we both participated in the creation of two regional organizations, Black Sea Economic Cooperation and Parliamentary Assembly of Black Sea Economic Cooperation. How do you evaluate their present activities in their terms of reference in the establishment of peace, security and stability in the Black Sea region? And second question is, we for most than 50 years, we have divided Cyprus before us. And the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is, according to my information, acknowledged diplomatically, politically by only one country, Turkey. Do you call this conflict frozen, and how do you think evaluation of the future development in the Cyprus?
Okay, thank you. Yes, so if you could take one of those on, I'm really sorry, Bogdan. Yes, you've got to go. I do apologise. You said at the start you had to be bang on 11:30. If you need to go, please do. I don't want to hold you back.
I would like to have one remark concerning the question.
Okay, very brief from you.
Very briefly.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for this opportunity of exchanging views with you. I would like to refer to the question that was not posed here, but to the remarks of a gentleman, speaking about the lack of consensus within the Ukrainian society, and of course that's visible between the political circles in Ukrainian politics. We are aware of that. We are aware of that in Central Europe, in Western Europe, and in the United States. That there is no consensus concerning the strategic choice of Ukraine. That's why we are not pushing Ukraine ahead. We are waiting for the final decisions of Ukraine concerning the NATO integration, concerning the European Union's integration. This is your choice. But in such circumstances, there are ideas and concepts that could be implemented. One of them, this is a regional cooperation. I would like to emphasize the role of regional cooperation. And my concept that was shared by the former Minister of Defense of Ukraine, together with the Minister of Defense of Lithuania, Arseniy, is going to be completed right now. This is the concept of creation of the brigade between Poland, Ukraine, and Lithuania, so-called Lit-Ugr-Pol brigade. And we hope that finally this brigade that would be available to missions under the auspices of a variety of organizations. It may be NATO, it may be European Union, OSCE or United Nations, that this project will be completed. This is one of the dimensions of regional cooperation that has a crucial role in the situation described in your national security strategy, the situation in which you haven't made the final strategic choice.
Bogdan, thank you very much indeed for that. And yes, sir, if you could make it very brief, a school report on BSEC and the like, perhaps stick with that point.
I will begin with Cyprus first. Cyprus cannot be compared to the frozen conflicts in the ex-Soviet Union geography, but it is not in the deep freeze, it is in the refrigerator again. Refrigerator because it is coming out of the refrigerator from time to time. Now there is an opportunity in Cyprus. Two reasons for this opportunity. One is that when Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the United States, prepared in the year 2004 a solution plan for Cyprus, okay, I will be short. The then President of Cyprus, Mr. Papadopoulos, signed the plan, but when he went back home, he cried in the television saying that the public opinion should not vote in favor of this plan. At that time, the present President of the Republic, Anastasiadis, voted in favor of this plan. So now that he has become president, let's see whether he will act in line with this. This is one of the opportunities. The other opportunity is the gas reserve which is discovered in the territorial waters. Cyprus, in order to benefit from this, has to export this gas. Otherwise, it will not bring any benefit. To export, of course, it has to compete with the other resources, and if it wants to compete, then it has to be exported through Turkey, the closest to land. For this, there is an opportunity. If it is not exported through Turkey, Turkish economy will not sink because of this, of the absence of this, but the Cypriot economy could gain a lot. So if these two opportunities could be capitalized on, it's a window of opportunity. It's up to the Greek Cypriots to benefit from it.
Yes, sir, thank you very much indeed for making that concise. And again, for your questions for that. We've run slightly over time, but that's because you want to keep it going, which is always a good sign. Could I just say, though, on behalf of this panel, thank you very much indeed, once again, for your pearls of wisdom and for your questions, of course. The panel. Thank you.